Hey, we're gonna look at control flow. So writing code to make decisions about which line of code should be executed, and that depends on some other stuff, and that's control flow. So we're gonna look at things like if else, and switch to make that happen. Basically, conditional flow. You think of it, you got a login screen. So there's a password and a username, and if everything's right, it moves on. If not, it goes back and redoes it. That's basically what we're looking at. So your basic logical operators you need to think about, you need to remember. If you've got double equal, two items must be equal. The left, everything is looking at the left and the right side and comparing those two together. So if both are equal, then you return, and these all return a Boolean, true or false. So for that to be true, both sides have to be equal. If either side is not the same, then it returns a false. Not means that the two sides are not equal to each other. You have your greater than equal, less than equal. Double ampersand is an and, so both sides have to be true for it to be true. Everything else is a false. On an or, if you've got the two vertical bars, then if either side is true, then it returns a true. So the only thing that will return a false in this case is if both sides are false. And then the bang operator, which is your exclamation point, returns the opposite. So that's your not. Your basic you look at this, if some condition, and it's got to return a true, and if it's true, you execute code. Real simple. So if your temperature is 100, let temperature equal 100. If the temperature is greater than or equal to 100, print the water is boiling. In this case, it'll print the water is boiling. We're going to look at an example, and I'm going to pull up some code, and we're going to go through it. I want you to go and type this out with me and practice it, see what it looks like, and see how things work and do it. But I want you to look at this, so we're going to bring in this code and look at what happens on each line. Okay, so let's look at this code. We're going to go and type in these. I want you to type this with me. I want you to go and do it and practice doing this, learning how to use Xcode and getting better with it. So we're going to let temperature equal 100 and return. And then we're going to put in our if statement. And so if I start typing temperature, you'll see it show up there in the autocomplete. So I can just hit return and accept that. And we're going to put greater than or equal to 100. And then you have to put your curly brace and open it. But if you hit return now, it will then give you the ending brace. And it'll also indent on the next line. So it sets everything up for you. So I can start typing print, hit return. It'll give me everything I need, put in my quotes, it'll put them around everything, and it'll tell me the water's boiling. Down arrow will bring me down, and then put a space. Now, standard Swift convention is to put it like this with the brace, space, else, space, brace. And then print again, and we're going to print not boiling. All right, so this is going to give me my code, and it's going to say, tells me over here that the water is boiling, and down here in the console as well, we can see that the water is boiling. If I were to change the temperature and say made it 95, we can see that the other line has been executed and the water is not boiling. So that's some really good stuff that it will do there for you and show you what it'll show you which line's been executed. All right, so we can also deal with Boolean value. So you let your number be 1,000 and let is small number equal number less than 10, and so it will just return true, false. I mean, this is just basic things. You can create these. You can put numbers, and then you can also return, those Boolean values, comparing things and evaluating whether or not they're greater than, equal, all those things. And then you can also do the same with not. So if not is snowing. I know that sounds a little crazy grammar-wise. You can actually make that better. But so is snowing is false. So if not false, so if true, then print it's not snowing. That's what it does. The case here is look at it. You can get things really complicated if you really want to. And my recommendation is always go with the obvious thing and say what you mean and make it easy to understand. Ands. So we're going to look at this, we're going to type it out and look at this line by line and see what happens and what executes. Okay, so let's look at the next one. We're going to look at these Boolean values. We're going to look at and. So we're going to let temperature equal 70 this time. And then if temperature, and again we get our autocomplete, greater than or equal to 65. And then we put in our and again our autocomplete. less than or equal to 75. Brace it. Print temperature is just right. Else if temperature is less than 65, and you have to be exclusive. You can't have things on top of each other. It will not let that work. So now we can see the temperature is just right. If I was to change that to, let's say, 75, it's still going to be just right because it's still an equal. If I do 750, it's a hot day. Yep. And if I change that to 7, we can see it changes over here and says that it's too cold. So it tells us which lines get called and are active. So that's what we're doing again. And we're going to do the same thing with an OR and see what executes in there and see how this goes. Again, type it out with me. We're now going to look at a OR case. So bar is plugged in. And again, use your camel case and use it correctly. And we're going to set this to be false. And then equals true. And then, so now we're going to ask if it is plugged in or has battery power. We're going to print and we can print otherwise. And you've got your emoji that you can use, and so we're just going to grab this guy because, you know, it's a little fun, and we'll grab that one. And you can use emoji in there. It's not always advisable, but you can do it. There are times where it works. So, and look at how this is named. So read. So it says if is plugged in or has battery power, print, you can use your laptop. So it's reading like a sentence. This is a good use of those variable names and the phrasing and the way that you're saying things. But let's look at this. So it's plugged in. It's not plugged in, but it does have battery power. So one of these two is true. If I were to flip these, I can still use it because it's in either one is true. If both are true, I can still do it. And so then, but let's put both as false. When they're both false, you'll see it switch, and it says that I can't do it now. So that's, you know, where ORs come in, and it both have to be true. So if anything is false, it's false. But in an OR, both have to be false to make it false. So it's a matter of which one is more often triggered and what you're looking for in that. So let's keep moving along. Okay, switch statements make it a little bit easier. If you've got a bunch of if-else's, it starts to get complicated and hard to keep track of what's going on. So switch just gives you some cases, and then you have to have a default. You have to have some way, you know, it has to be exhaustive. You have to include every possible element in there, and that's your default case almost every time, you know, without fail. You can do it without it, but it's just easier with the default. And so we'll type this out and look at this one and see how this works. Hey, and we're back again. We're going to look at a switch statement now. So, and again, type this in with me so you can get a feel for the putting things in and how it goes. Don't just watch. But you can see how if I were to just hit switch enter, this is how it's going to give me my placeholder text and give me some things to work with. This is good. It lets you see what to do. I not particularly like doing it that way. I like to put them in, but then you pick your variable that you're going to be acting on. So I'm using the variable number of wheels, and now I'm going to act on number of wheels in this switch statement. And then you start typing in case, And our case, you put what is the value that you're looking for, evaluating. So in this case, I'm evaluating that number. So I want to put a number in. In this case, it'll be a 1. And then when I put my colon, it's going to line it up correctly automatically. So make it work like that. Now, ignore the errors for the moment. We're going to talk about them as we go along. If I hit enter, it's going return. It's going to actually give me my, it's going to show and indent it where it should. And then I can come out of there, enter, start to type in case again. And when I put my colon, it lines everything up correctly. Now you'll notice that the statements are coming up faster. One of the things that happens is as you're using it, it's saying, okay, well, you've been using this, so you're probably wanting to use this again, so it's going to bring those auto up more quickly. Now, you'll notice it still says switch must be exhaustive. You have to include every possible option there could be. So the easiest way to do that is with default. So there you go. And then I put my colon, it lines it up. And then so for default, I'm going to print. There we go. And so this says, hey, since I had a 2, it's going to be a bicycle. If I were to change that and make it a 4, you'll see which line gets triggered, the quad cycle, and prints that below. And then if I were to add a 3 at the end of that, it's going to tell me there's a lot of wheels. Now, there's an obvious error in this. If I were to put in 0, I have no wheels. Instead of telling me I don't have a vehicle at all, it's going to say that's a lot of wheels. So there's nothing for below a 1 in this case. So that's something you have to think about is how is this getting used? What are my conditions and things like that. So there we go. That's looking at initially looking at a switch statement. You can also deal with multiple conditions, so you can actually put a bunch of things on the line, just separate them all by a comma, and then everything on that line. A, E, I, O, U would say that it's a value. You don't have to type each one in a separate line. Makes it a little bit easier, and it's cleaner and easier to read. You can use ranges, and we're going to type this out and see how these ranges work. The ranges are with the ellipsis, the 3 dots. Okay, so let's look at some ranges and how we can use numbers another way. We saw that we could put them in with commas and put several things in, but we can also do that with ranges. And again, type this in with me. So we're going to have a distance there. And we're going to switch on distance. And I can put my range in like so. And then I can do this with a default. And so we will do that so our distance is close. And we misspelled destination there. That's easy to do. It's one of the nice things with that. I can, if I were to add a 2 at the end of that, it's going to move it into the next case. And you see how this is working in there with those. And now it's far. And then it's going to ask me, are you sure I want to travel this far? Okay, some other things I can do in this. I can also make this, instead of start with a 0, I can make it an open. And it would be any number. So if I were to put a negative in there, instead of it being the default, it would actually say it's close because it's under 9. It's opening up that other side of it. So there we go. Have some fun with that. So we got a switch challenge coming up, and we're going to play with this in a little bit.